This presentation is about Indigenous leadership in schools with mostly non-Indigenous international students. I'll summarize the difference between Indigenous and Eurocentric pedagogy, highlight the importance of bridging this gap, and an implementation plan to indigenize the school. Various articles explain that Indigenous pedagogy is land-based, spiritual, holistic, communal, cyclical, local knowing, and seeks coexistence with nature and people, whereas Western pedagogy focuses on knowledge that are decontextualized, individual, competitive, linear, universal, and seeks power over relationships. As Dr. Pertese pointed out the unbalanced power in the two education systems, Western education's view of superiority has diminished Indigenous ways of knowing. This needs to be challenged to allow room to integrate Indigenous education. Educators need to address these inequalities and inequities that have created the notion of unbalanced power by examining structures and policies in our current education system that cause this imbalance. We then should correct these strategies and systems to acknowledge Indigenous worldviews. Examples are on the next slide. Indigenous education in the current curriculum has been built under a Eurocentric view with little information on pre-contact. It's lecture and teacher-based, focusing on the transfer of knowledge from the teacher to the students and the linear structure of scientific reasoning instead of applying Indigenous cyclical land-based pedagogy. Elder Albert Marshall's two-eye seeing concept gives us tools to cross cultural borders. To avoid the tendency of dominant by difference, teachers must explicitly acknowledge their privileged position and give more time to understand Indigenous worldviews. This must be done to authentically teach both Indigenous and Western knowledge concurrently. Educators should embrace and weave through both perspectives and knowledge systems. Some barriers are unequal time spent on Indigenous worldviews yields to unequal exposure to students to internalize the topic and the lack of resources for non-Indigenous teachers, especially in independent school systems. Through the lens of two-eye seeing, we see the strength of each perspective and combined. This means uptaking the weaving of creativity, nature, and relationships, and also the unweaving of instruments, tools, and scientific analysis that have taken us to where we are today. Some possibilities for our school, Alexander Academy, are focusing on the 4 R's of the Indigenous philosophy. The school can reach out to the 3 local bands offices to form relationships. Indigenous units are to be built in the current curriculum. An example is to introduce local Indigenous landscapes and organizations. We show respect by following protocols and inviting elders to major school events, or we can reach out to them in cultural activities. Another possibility is to involve elders in decision-making processes. We reciprocate by providing a scholarship for Indigenous youth to study at our school tuition-free. I organize these possibilities into a strategic plan and assess the school against the Aboriginal education rubric created by the shared learning community in ST48. The overall result is that we're at a developing level according to the 5-point scale of the rubric, with some variation on individual key areas. Evidence are a third of the school staff is in the Indigenizing Steering Committee, which includes teachers and the leadership team. Each teacher attends at least one Indigenous-focused professional development per year. They then collaborate with each other and create cross-curricular projects to support a holistic pedagogy. Students learn about Indigenous cultures in English classes and express their thoughts in art classes. There are a number of Indigenous-focused field trips such as visiting the Bilberry Gallery, the Museum of Anthropology, incorporating Indigenous knowledge during a trip to the Grouse Mountain, the Talking Tree tour of Stanley Park led by Squamish knowledge keepers. Good news! The Board of Directors approved full scholarships for Indigenous youth to attend the school. Aligned with the school's current goals, we aim to authentically give a voice for Indigenous youth to represent their culture and allow non-Indigenous students to authentically make connections with their Indigenous peers. Other goals are to support Indigenous youth with existing programming and services offered by the school and promoting relationship building with local Indigenous groups. Benefits to the youth are to gain access to one-on-one guidance on career readiness and research, experiential learning in and out of the classroom so that students can build skills needed for post-graduation. Small class size allows individual attention and flexibility to adapt to Indigenous youth's unique needs, allowing students to retake courses or course recovery to give them the flexibility to catch up on courses if needed. Youth can take dual credit concurrent courses to earn post-secondary credits while attending high school. Attending a small school with representations over 20 nationalities means Indigenous youth have a chance to represent their culture, to build a sense of pride and boost their self-esteem. The school's program emphasizes leadership skills building, which are important for Indigenous students to acquire and leads to students' post-graduation success. This program's success will be shared amongst independent school groups and motivates more schools to start similar programs to support Indigenous youth. The plan is that for the rest of the year, the leadership team reaches out to connect with local Indigenous groups. By next year, to develop a board-approved course that focuses mainly on the three local groups' culture and language, and to gain Indigenous representation on staff and Parent Advisory Council. To build services to provide culturally relevant support for Indigenous youth, to review the policy to allow exceptions for youth's unique needs such as needing to attend cultural ceremonies and rituals, and in 3 years, having Indigenous representation on our board of directors. Thank you for listening.